basically mudlarking is when you go down onto the foreshore of the River Thames when the tide's low to look for mainly historic artefacts. The Thames is tidal between Teddington and the estuary, and twice every 24 hours the river goes down and it exposes enough of the riverbed to get down onto it. And every tide washes out objects from within the riverbed and washes them in from further into the river and leaves them behind. So you never know what you're going to find on the next tide. So it could be a medieval coin, it could be a Tudor shoe, it could be a Victorian bottle, or it could be something, as a torn up photograph, a love letter, even the chamber of a gun I've found. It really is obsessive once you start, because it's like a treasure trove down there, but it's not real treasure because you're never going to get rich from mudlarking. It's just rubbish. It's rubbish that goes back 2,000 years plus. Really how I got into it, very gradually. I moved to London from the countryside. I grew up on a farm, and I moved to London in the early 90s, and I really went for it, and I had a great time. But I missed the quiet and peace and solitude of the countryside, and I was looking for somewhere quiet to go, somewhere just to get away from the city, and I found the river, and it really was a streak of solitude in the centre of chaos. And I started walking along it, and for years I just walked along the river paths, and I didn't really even notice the river going up and down, to be honest. And I think that's the same for a lot of people who live in London. They don't know that it goes up and down, and then it occurred to me that it was moving up and down, and I could actually go down onto the foreshore if I wanted to. And one day I found myself at the top of some river stairs, and I went down and I found a clay pipe, and it occurred to me that there must be more stuff down here, and I kept coming back and I kept finding more, and before I knew it, it was my obsession, and I was down there all the time. So that's how I ended up on the foreshore.
And did you know, at what point did you realise that you were a mudlark? You were part of a sort of wider group of people who were all going and finding exciting things on the foreshore?
It took me a long time. I didn't really realise there was such a thing as mudlarking. I just thought I was just a mad person who went down and poked around in the mud. And sometimes I'd see other people, because you don't really, if you're not in the centre of London, you don't see that many people, even now on the foreshore. And back then, this was 15 years ago I started, there were even less people doing it. And occasionally I'd see someone, poking around and just thought, they were sort of doing the same thing as me or got lost. And then I think I read something in a newspaper that was talking about mudlarking and why, what people were doing. And then it occurred to me that that's what I was doing. And by that time I got the knee pads, I was kneeling down and I was really, really going for it. So I by that time I was a fully fledged mudlark, I suppose.
And it sounds like it's a fairly solitary thing, but do you talk to other mudlarks? Do you come across people? Do you talk about what you found that day?
You do, yes. I mean, I go down there mainly for I like being there on my own. So I don't go down there in a group, and very few mudlarks do go in a group. Most people go on their own. And there's a sort of code of etiquette. If you see another mudlark, you sort of say hello. But because the tide, you've only got a few hours on every tide, so you're not going to waste time chatting to somebody because everyone's there to look. And the river's always, it's coming back in. So yeah, there are people I recognise and people I know, lots of people I know from down there, but I don't go down there to socialise, but it is nice bumping into people I know, just comparing finds and doing that.
And have your finds changed over the time that you've been mudlarking?
They have. I mean, anyone going down, if anyone here went down onto the foreshore, I can guarantee that you'd find the 3 Ps. Pipes, even if it's just a pipe stem. Pottery, because there's loads of it down there. And if you look really carefully, you'll find some handmade pins. The first things you'll find are pottery and pipes, probably blue and white pottery. There's loads of bricks, there's loads of roof tiles. Pretty much everything down there is there because people have been around. So you'll always find something, and that's what people usually sort of come back with when they first start, is blue and white pottery and pipe stems. And then as you go, you start to get your eye in. And you start to notice things, and it took me ages to find my first coin, but once I found my first coin I started spotting. I'd come back with one most weeks. So it's just practice, but as you practice you start coming back with more stuff, and it's knowing what you're looking at as well, because you walk over so much stuff that you don't realise is worth picking up until you learn about it and you've seen it somewhere else in a museum or someone else has showed you. So my finds have got much better over time.
And can you talk us through sort of finding something that you think or is exciting, or that might be something but you don't know what it is, that process from coming across it to learning about it?
Yeah, well, I mean, I search. It sounds very boring, but I go down there and I kneel down and I will search a space not much bigger than this part of the room for up to 6 hours. But while I'm doing it, I'm lost. You know, I'm completely lost in what I'm doing, working through my week, not thinking about my problems. And when you're looking for objects that don't fit with nature. So perfect circles and straight lines, nature doesn't do them. So that's what you're looking for. And that moment when you spot something, it's really exciting. It sounds so nerdy, doesn't it? But it's so exciting. And you pick it up. And sometimes, I mean, you do find a lot of the same things. You know, a coin's a coin. You know, it's gonna be fairly easy to research. It sometimes has the date on it. It can tell you where it was made and which king or queen it was made under. Other things I've picked up, and I have no earthly idea what it is, but I can tell it's been made by hand or that it's old. Old things just have that look. And they're the things I really like because now I can take them home. And then I've got the rest of the week to research it and try and find out what it is. Yeah, it's just I suppose it consumes my sort of spare time in that way. It's that sort of finding it, and then the rest of the week you're researching it, and then putting it on Facebook and sharing it with people. Yeah.
And how do you go about the researching? Is it lots of Googling or talking to people?
Google has been great. Google's brilliant. Google is really helpful. It's also been very helpful writing the book. But yeah, for researching objects, it's been fabulous. There is something called the Portable Antiquities Scheme. It is this fantastic program where it's part of the British Museum, and they're trying to record all the objects that are found in fields and rivers and beaches, and to put them in this big database. And they've recorded over 1 million objects already. And as metal detectors are getting better at finding things, and more people are doing it as a hobby, more stuff's being recorded. And it's really important to record this stuff because it's our lost history. And so they've got this fabulous database. And if you've got even an inkling of what it might be, and you type it into the database, you get all these pictures come up, and often just scrolling through those will answer a lot of questions. And I've got a library of weird books that are also very helpful.
It's developed over time.
Yes, very strange books. So yeah.
And can anyone go out on the foreshore? I think you talk in the book a bit about how it's becoming more restrictive.
It is. Since 2016, the Port of London Authority owns the foreshore. So when you're down there, you're on private land, and you need permission. It's really easy to get. You go online and find Google PLA, metal detecting, or permits. It'll come up, and I think it costs £70 for 3 years. And anyone going down onto the foreshore must have a permit if they're going to search it. There's also some rules and restrictions. Some areas are protected. On the North Shore, you're not allowed to disturb it. Queen Hythe Dock, you're not allowed to go in at all. It's as protected as Stonehenge. So there's scheduled monuments down there too. On the South Shore, you can scrape a little bit if that's what you want to do, or metal detect. It's important to have a permit now. So anyone can go. It's easy to get a permit, but you do need a permit.
Yeah. And so some people will scrape, but you just look by eye and you'll see what sort of the river has brought up that day. I do.
It's a very meditative thing for me, and my philosophy is that if the river's left it there, it's there for me to take. I don't like forcing the foreshore to give up its contents. The other problem is that as soon as you you get one person scraping, that's fine. You get sort of 10 other people coming after them and scraping. You're going down quite a long way. If you're digging into the foreshore's eroding hugely at the moment. Because there's so much more river traffic, and the river traffic that's going through, it creates this huge wake that's digging out the foreshore, and a lot of our archaeology is being lost. It's actually undermining the river wall as well in places, quite dangerously. As soon as you dig down into the foreshore, you're disturbing this very compact earth, I suppose, and making it softer. And so when the river starts to eats away at these areas much quicker, and then it all collapses, and then it eats away. And so digging really does harm the foreshore. So I don't think people should be digging these days. I choose not to. I just pick up what the river leaves. Sometimes I come home completely. I never come home completely empty-handed, but sometimes I don't come home with much. But that's all part and parcel of why I do it. Yeah. So,
and has it changed? You've been mudlarking 15 years, You say your finds have changed. You've got your eye in for finding particular things, but the river must have changed in that time. The people on the river, is it busier?
It's got a lot busier. Yeah, there's those speedboat trips now. They didn't used to be around. People canoeing. There's a lot more people doing that. There's a lot more river traffic, which is great. You know, the rivers runs through the centre of our city. It's why London's here. It's been so important in the past, and it was neglected for so long from the sort of 60s when the ships stopped coming to deliver their cargo. The river became a really neglected place, and I think that was a shame. So I think it's really nice that people are using it again. Also, places like Bankside, nobody used to go to Bankside 15 years ago. Then, you know, sort of, well, more than 15 years ago, I suppose, and they built the Millennium Bridge and all of that. And now it's really, really busy down there. But you can always find a nice quiet spot along the river. It's about 160 kilometres long between Teddington and the estuary, so there's plenty of quiet places to go.
And do you have a favourite spot?
I do. I'm not
going to ask you to share it. Don't worry. And so for you, in the book, you talk about objects that connect us to sort of wider history, so the big sweeping changes that have come through London, but also sort of personal stories of the people who have dropped an item and what they may have been doing. Is that the bit that sort of excites you in terms of the objects? Is it the personal stories or the connection to the wider history?
It's very much the personal stories, because the things I'm finding, like I say, it's just rubbish. It's you know, it's nothing of any real value, but it's the personal possessions of the ordinary people. It's got nothing to do with kings and queens and battles and dates. It's none of that boring stuff that you have to learn at school. It's just ordinary stuff that connects you to history and connects you to ordinary people, our ancestors and the people who created London. And they've left nothing else behind of them. There's no real record of them apart from this rubbish they've dropped. Something might have, you know, might be worn to the shape of their hand, or they might have scratched their initials on it. And it's those connections, those really personal connections with really ordinary people, and that knowledge that when you pick something up, you're the first person in however many hundreds of years to touch it since the person lost or dropped it. And that feeling of literally reaching back through time and shaking hands with history is priceless.
Yeah.
You know, it's more priceless than gold to me. Yeah. And
you have these objects at home. Do you have particular objects that are your favourite? So if you were to be losing everything to the tide, that you'd want to hold on to and sort of keep that connection?
I do, yes I do. I mean, I curate my collection really carefully because I don't want boxes of stuff. There's no point in taking everything. You know, I take a lot back, I give a lot away. I just keep the good stuff, or the stuff I haven't had, or the stuff that I collect. Most of it fits in a printer's chest. There's 18 little drawers. And all the pieces I keep are really special to me. If I was to save bits, the thing I would save is my Tudor shoe. It's a child's shoe, and it's so personal because it's still got the lines across the top, you know, from where somebody was bending, and the hole in the toe where their toe's gone through, and it's pushed down at the back, you know, the way your parents always told you not to do because it was naughty. And inside you can see just the gentle impression of the previous owner's foot, and holding that is so personal. And it's magical, and I would save that.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah. From that you can get the whole narrative of some Tudor child went home, one shoe missing.
You've got a bloody good hiding, and you know, it's sort of like, or were they trying to walk through the mud and it came off, or had they just worn it out and thrown it away, or were they being bullied and someone pulled it off and threw it in the river laughing? You know, there's so many stories around that. It's it's lovely. It's about this big, and it's just so sweet. Yeah.
And if you're looking in London, which is your home, do you find yourself mudlarking anywhere else? Something on holiday, you start beachcombing, or is it sort of something you reserve for the Thames?
No, I do. I'm one of those people who wander around with my eyes down. I never look up enough. So wherever I go, I've always been quite good at finding things because I've always walked around like this. So yeah, but I think we're all sort of natural sort of gatherers, aren't we? You know, it's something primitive in us just to always be looking for something. It comes from that old hunter-gatherer thing and our attraction to fire and water. So it's just something that comes, I think, naturally to everybody, but definitely I find it hard to go anywhere and not look. So yeah.
And do you, from doing this, from finding things that other people have found, I think you mentioned early on in the book that you've always been good at finding lost things. Do you feel differently when you lose something?
I hate losing things. It really throws me off when I lose things because I'm very careful not to lose things. And if I lose something and I can't find it, it really throws me out. Yeah, it does. And I was always the person in the family who was called on when things got lost. I found my grandmother's diamond out of her engagement ring under the washing line once. That was my piece de resistance, I think. I walked out of Audible about 2 months ago and found £10 on the floor, so that was good. So yeah, I'm good at finding things, and I don't like losing things, no.
We can now open up to the floor for questions. So we have a microphone to go around.
Hi. Yeah, we're all obviously really responsible and careful in our disposal of things not into the river. But what are the pins, pipes and pottery that you hope this generation passes on to future generations of mudlarks?
Do you know what, this is the thing. I mean, I'm finding rubbish. Our ancestors' rubbish is made of metal and leather and wood and clay and glass and things that will break down harmlessly. What depresses me is that what we're leaving behind is plastic. And that's what we'll be known for, is plastic, because really we're leaving very little else. And you don't see much of it in central London. And the river is cleaner than it's been in living memory. It's floating just below the surface. And if you go out to the estuary, there are banks of plastic. In Hammersmith, there's whole islands made of wet wipes because they're not flushable. They come out of the storm drains. When it rains really hard, the sewers overflow into the storm drains, it goes straight out into the river, and the wet wipes are actually we're changing the geography of the river with our rubbish, and it's disgusting. And there's a lot of press about the amount of plastic in the sea. It's coming out of the rivers, it's in the rivers. And sadly, I think that is going to be our legacy. Although the river is also a sacred river. And there's a lot of Hindu offerings that go in the river. So there's going to be a lot of that people are going to find in hundreds of years' time. That might confuse them. Maybe people will still be using it as a sacred river. And I like that, so long as the statues aren't plastic.
And so it has been a sacred river
forever. Yes. Since prehistoric times, people have been throwing things in. So, they found Bronze Age, mainly up sort of Vauxhall way. They found a lot of Bronze Age swords and shields. The Battersea shield came from Vauxhall. The Romans used to throw pennies and statues in. Medieval times, they'd throw pilgrim badges in when they came back from pilgrimage as a thanks for safe return. And even in the 18th century, sailors would flip a very worn halfpenny into the river to pay for fair wind. So, who hasn't gone past a wishing well or something and thrown? So it's something about doing it, isn't there? And so you do find a lot of offerings. And now it seems to be religious offerings. I found Wiccan spells, Islamic objects, West African, Jewish, Christian, Taoists, but mainly Hindu, a lot of Hindu objects, which I think is really nice. It's the river's changing with us. And it's always been a sacred river.
With the success of your book and obviously more and more people thinking about mudlarking, are you worried at all that you might lose all those tranquil places that you love so much now with the onslaught of people doing it? And the second question is, have you found anything more recent that maybe is so personal and recent that you've been able to maybe track someone down and get it back to them? So something, I'm trying to think of some things like, something more in the last 10 years or 20 years that you've been able to actually track someone down.
Your first question, I've been asked that before, and it's an obvious question. I've written about it, and it's a quiet place for me to go, but it's not a secret place. It runs through one of the biggest cities in the world. It's obvious. If you want to go mudlarking, it's fairly obvious where to go. I didn't need to write a book about it for that. I think it's great sharing it. I think it's a shared history. It's also history that's washing away. It's here on one tide and gone on the next. So I think it's great. The more people that know about it, the better. And it's you will always, like I say, you'll always be able to find a quiet place on the foreshore. The estuary is absolutely beautiful, and there's miles and miles of mud and nobody there. Depending where you go, you'll find somewhere quiet. But no, I think it's good to share. I think it's really good to share. So it's not a secret place. With regards to tracking someone living down, no, I haven't. I haven't. Oh no, I have. Yes, a bank card. I sent a bank card back to someone. I found a lot of bank cards, and there was one I managed to get back to somebody. I found some very personal things. I found a human skull not so long ago, but that was probably, well, it's probably very old. It's probably about 200 years old. It probably came from one of the Napoleonic prison of warships, prison hulks. But I reported it to the police, which is what you have to do with human remains. And the police went and got it and came round and took a DNA test from me. So, yeah, I haven't heard anything back from them. I haven't been arrested. So, so yeah, so some things are very personal, almost too personal. I found a wedding ring I threw back in. It felt too personal to keep. Some things are just too personal. People throw things into the river, they think they're gone. You know, it's a place where people put things that they don't want to think about anymore, and sometimes it feels wrong to take that on board. And so there are things I've thrown back that are too personal to take.
Thank you. Thanks a lot. Very interesting. I was wondering if you can share with us a story about maybe your oldest object or the most valuable. What's the story behind, and what is that?
Well, the oldest objects are fossils. They tell the story of the river itself. The oldest human-made objects are prehistoric flints, worked flints and scrapers, Mesolithic mainly. I've got a nice 8th century buckle plate that's Celtic, comes from Ireland, which is really nice. I thought it was Tudor, and I've only recently found out it's much older. And just wondering how it got to London from Ireland was, interests me. Valuable, it depends what you call valuable, because I found golden things, and they're probably quite valuable. I've got some quite rare coins that are probably quite valuable. Like I say, valuable are the things like I've got a pewter bodkin with someone's initials, and it dates back to the 17th century, and it's about this long, and it's got a scoop at the end for scooping out earwax. Whoever owned it, her initials were S.E., and she would have used it to scoop out, and they used earwax to pull threads together. It was easier than having some beeswax, cheaper than beeswax as well, and it's always there. So they used it for that. Those really personal things, I think, are the most valuable to me. The gold Tudor lace end that I found is probably quite valuable, but I donated it to the Museum of London, so it's in their collection now. Yeah.
And you mentioned with finding a skull that you had the police at your door, but you must have come across lots of people who have very niche, interesting professions. Has that been a sort of side reward of being on the Thames? Yes,
there's lots of people I've discovered, especially writing the book, but in the research of my objects, who have such niche interests. There's a man who only collects lead tokens, and he's specifically interested in 17th century lead tokens, which is quite niche. There's a man who's written a book about bag seals, lead bag seals, and what he can't tell you about bag seals isn't worth knowing. There's the Society for Clay Pipe Research, which is incredibly niche, and they have a conference once a year. So there's enough people to have a conference. So yeah, and the reenactors as well. I find reenactors fascinating and brilliant because they're living history, and they love all the stuff I find, because it's the stuff I find you don't find in museums, and it's the things that they use. And I love that someone will dress up and get it so perfect that they've actually woven the cloth themselves, made the shoes, and then they go away on their weekends and live that specific year over and over again. It's brilliant. It's brilliant. Yeah, I've met some fantastic people.
Have you been tempted to go yourself?
I'd love to dress up.
A collection of your objects.
Well, maybe. I'd love to dress up, but probably not every weekend. But I think it would be quite interesting just to sort of live in the clothes of someone of all the, who once owned all the objects that I find. Yeah. Yeah, they really like the pins, so they get very excited about those.
I like the, you talked about the money pots from the theatres that would be passed around. The sort of it was a single-use money pot that would be sort of smashed, like the South American ones that you can get as piggy banks now.
Yes. Yeah, they're about the size of an orange. They had a little knob on top, and when there were all the theatres on Bankside, the Globe and Shakespeare's theatres, they'd carry them round and people put their penny in before they went into the theatres, and then they'd take them to an office around the back of the theatre, which was called the money box office, and they'd smash them. So they were box office smashes. They'd smash them to get the money out, and you find sort of shards from these on the foreshore, and the little sort of bubbles from the top. I've got quite a collection of those now, and I've got a complete one, but I didn't find it. Another mudlark found it in the 80s, and I've been given it, which is nice. But yeah.
Any more questions from the audience?
Hi, thank you. I was wondering, is mudlarking also about like not only finding things, but also about finding yourself? It's about you are so focused on a specific task, you start like having thoughts you didn't have like in like your day-to-day life.
It is. I mean, that's why I've got twins, and it was really escape from them that really, got me down there a lot. It really is an escape. It's escape from everything, especially, London's crazy. It kind of eats you up. And I think it's important, especially these days with everything that's going on, for people to have an out, somewhere they can go where the world isn't in their face. And for me, it really is as important as the things I find is the time I get down there on my own. And that's really precious to me. And when you're sort of focused on something and nothing, you really do. Your mind just relaxes, and you can really work through your week. So, yeah, it's a great place to go to meditate.
Hi. Do you have to declare your finds to the Museum of London or to, the coroners if you think it's treasure or something, or is it yours to keep when you find it?
That's a good question. Technically, everything you find doesn't belong to you. It belongs to the Port of London Authority. Under the terms of your licence, you are honour bound to report anything of historic importance to the Museum of London for the Portable Antiquities Scheme. So it's recorded by a Finds Liaison Officer, which I do. If you find anything that's treasure, which simply put, it's quite complicated, but simply put is anything with a percentage of silver or gold, precious metal, and over 300 years old and not a single coin, then legally you have to report it, and it goes through the coroner's process. It's offered to museums. If they want to buy it, then you get half the value and the landowner gets half the value, or you can donate it. So I've had a few things go through treasure, and only the gold lace end the Museum of London wanted, and I donated it. Everything else I got back, so yeah.
Yeah, also a question about the licence. I seem, you described the process of getting the licence, but I seem to remember something about there being a finite small number of quota of places for mudlarks. Is that a complete false memory?
It's not. No, there are two licences. There's a standard licence which anyone can apply for, and there isn't a limited number of those. Then there is something called a mudlarks licence, which is only available to members of the Society of Mudlarks, and that's limited to 50 or 51 members. And you can only get that licence if you're a member of the society, and you can only become a member of the society by invitation. There we go.
Can they do something else that you can't do?
They are allowed to dig deep holes in the foreshore. They're the only people who are allowed to dig deep holes, and they can dig 1.2 metres into the foreshore. And they can detect in areas that people with a standard licence aren't allowed to detect. It's a sort of old thing. It was in the 1970s when everyone started getting metal detectors. People were going down to the foreshore and digging it over like an allotment. And so the Museum of London came to an agreement with the mudlarks then and said, look, we'll give you a licence to do it if you report your finds to us and you stop selling them. And so this is where the licence thing came up, and then it evolved into this two-tier licence, but they kept their right to this digging licence. So it's just something that's never really been changed or looked at since then.
I have another question about because you talked about what you do with your finds and where you keep them, and I've seen on your Instagram, I think, that you sometimes will find creative uses for your finds and sort of making something with them. And what's the sort of enjoyment in that you find? Is it sort of the creative process? Is it sort of turning the finds into something else that they weren't?
Yeah, I don't do it so much. I've made a splashback out of sort of 17th century Staffordshire ware, which was quite nice. I don't do it so much, but people on my Facebook page make some beautiful things out of the stuff they find, and I think it's really nice that these objects are having a new life and are being repurposed. It's sort of just, changing their journey through history slightly. I'm wearing a Tudor button at the moment. I wear some of the stuff that I find, which is nice. Some of the stuff feels too personal to wear. Yeah, I think it's nice. There again, there are mixed feelings. Some people don't think these objects should be tampered with and changed, but I think it's nice. People enjoying them and turning them into something else and something usable.
Are you conscious that you're leaving your twins with your collection?
I know, I am very, yes, I know. I have had words with my partner about, if I fall under a bus, please don't just throw it all away or give it away. Be very careful. There's a huge responsibility I'm leaving them with. So I don't know, probably, if I'm lucky enough to live till a ripe old age, I'll find a new home for it. By then, if they don't want it, then it won't just be end up in a car boot sale. It does look like a load of old rubbish, but it's not.
Thank you so much, Lara. That was been fascinating.
Welcome. You're welcome.